The only way to save my life was to end it first. My name used to be Maya, and the man standing in front of my bakery, 3,000 miles from the life I burned to the ground, is the reason I died. I'm staring at him, and my lungs just stop. The smell of fresh sourdough and cinnamon, usually so comforting, now feels like it's choking me. David looks exactly the same. Tailored charcoal suit, perfectly coiffed hair, and that smile, that calm, terrifyingly patient smile that once made me feel like the luckiest woman in Seattle. "Hello, Maya," he says. His voice is smooth, like expensive bourbon, not a single crack of emotion. "You've gained weight, suits you. The small town life clearly agrees with you." My hand goes to the counter to steady myself. I can feel the flour on my skin, the grit of reality, but I feel like I'm floating in a nightmare. "How did you find me, David?" He tilts his head, like he's studying a complicated surgical chart. "I'm a neurosurgeon, Maya. I specialize in finding things that are hidden. It took 3 years and a very expensive team of investigators, but I never stopped looking for my grieving wife." "I'm not your wife," I whisper, my voice cracking. "Maya Mitchell drowned in the Puget Sound 3 years ago. The Coast Guard found her kayak. They found her life vest. They found the note." David takes a step closer, and I instinctively flinch, knocking a display of muffins to the floor. The sound is like a gunshot in the quiet shop. "They never found the body, Maya. And that was always going to be a problem for me. To understand why I'm standing here, shaking, in a tiny coastal town in Maine, you have to understand who David Mitchell is. To the world, he's a saint. He's the man who performs 12-hour surgeries on children. He's the man who donated a wing to the university hospital. He's the man whose wife tragically suffered from severe postpartum depression and took her own life. But I know the other David. The David who, 6 months after our daughter Sophie was born, started managing my life for my own good. It started small. He didn't like my friends, said they were distractions from being a good mother. He took over the finances because I was too stressed to handle the bills. He even talked to my doctor behind my back, convincing her that my mood swings required medication that made me feel like I was walking through a fog. The first time he hit me, he didn't leave a bruise. He's a doctor, you see. He knows exactly where it hurts the most without leaving a mark. He held me down on the kitchen floor, his knee in my back, and whispered that he was doing this because he loved me, because I was becoming unstable, and he had to keep the family together. I tried to leave twice. The first time he found me at a motel within 4 hours. He didn't yell. He just took Sophie from my arms, handed her to a nanny I'd never met, and told me that if I ever tried to kidnap his daughter again, he would use his connections to have me committed to a psychiatric ward. And I believed him. Everyone in Seattle loved David. Who would believe the unstable wife over the hero surgeon? The second time I tried to leave, he almost killed me. We were at our summer house on the Sound. Sophie was with my parents for the weekend. We were arguing. Well, I was crying, and he was calmly explaining why I wasn't fit to be a mother. Told him I wanted a divorce. I told him I'd tell the board at the hospital about his temper. He didn't blink. He just walked over, put his hands around my throat, and pushed me back against the glass railing of the deck. I could see the dark water churning 60 feet below. "You really think they'll believe you, Maya?" he whispered, his grip tightening. "A woman with a documented history of depression? Who's been on medication for a year? If you fell tonight, it wouldn't be a murder. It would be a tragedy." In that moment, looking into his cold, blue eyes, I realized he wasn't joking. He had spent months laying the groundwork. Telling everyone I was suicidal so that when he finally pushed me, no one would ask questions. I stopped fighting. He stepped back, adjusted his watch, and told me to go to bed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching my daughter sleep through the baby monitor, and I realized that if I stayed, I was going to die. And if I died, David would raise Sophie. He would mold her, control her, and eventually, he would break her just like he broke me. The only way to save her was to make sure he could never find me. But more importantly, I had to make sure he stopped looking. I contacted a woman I'd met in a hidden forum online. Her name was Sarah, but she went by the Architect. She helped women like me disappear. "You have to understand," she told me over a burner phone, "once you cross that line, you can never go back. You are dead. You will miss your daughter's first day of school. You will miss her birthdays. You will be a ghost." "I'm already a ghost, Sarah," I told her. "At least this way, the ghost can eventually come back to haunt him." We spent 4 months planning. I started acting out more in public. I made sure the neighbors saw me crying on the lawn. I made sure my therapist heard me talk about the dark water calling to me. It was the hardest acting job of my life, especially when I had to look at Sophie and know I was about to leave her in that monster's house. But Sarah was right. It was the only way. David had the money, the lawyers, and the power. If I fought him in court, I'd lose. He'd get full custody, and I'd be lucky to see her once a month behind a glass partition. The night of the storm, I took the kayak out. I'd checked the weather reports. It was a small craft advisory. Perfect. I paddled out into the choppy, freezing water of the Sound. About a mile out, I capsized the kayak. I left my jacket, my shoes, and a handwritten note tucked into a waterproof bag clipped to the seat. I can't do this anymore. The fog won't lift. David, take care of our girl. I'm sorry. I hated writing those words. I hated giving him that victory. But it was the bait. I swam to a small private dock where Sarah was waiting with a van. I was shivering so hard my teeth were rattling, but as she wrapped me in a blanket and drove me away from the coast, I felt a strange cold sense of relief. Maya Mitchell was dead. I spent the next 3 years becoming Clara. I moved to the furthest corner of the country. I dyed my hair dark. I wore glasses. I grew a garden. I worked at a bakery, eventually buying it from an old woman who didn't ask questions about where I came from. Every night, I would look at the one photo I'd kept of Sophie, hidden inside the lining of my jewelry box. I followed David's life through the news. I watched him win awards. I watched him hold mental health awareness galas in my name. I watched him play the tragic widower to perfection. And now he's standing in my shop. You really thought Maine was far enough? David asks, leaning against the counter. He picks up a stray crumb and rolls it between his fingers. I have to admit, the dead wife narrative was very good for my career. The sympathy was unprecedented. But then, I found out about the offshore account. My heart drops. The account. I'd been so careful, but I'd started funneling tiny amounts of money. Money I thought he'd never miss. You were always a little too smart for your own good, Maya, he says. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a phone. He taps the screen and slides it across the counter toward me. It's a video. It's Sophie. She's bigger now, her hair tied in a messy ponytail, playing in a park I recognize. She looks happy, but then the camera pans and I see a man standing nearby. It's one of David's security guards. She misses you, David says, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly soft register. She asks about mommy every night. It's quite heartbreaking, really. I tell her you're an angel in the clouds, but I think she's starting to realize that angels don't leave breadcrumbs in Maine. What do you want, David? I ask, my voice trembling. I want my wife back, he says simply. The grieving widower act is starting to wear thin. People are starting to ask why I haven't moved on. It would be much more dramatic if you were found. A miracle recovery. You had amnesia. You wandered off in a fugue state. We'll have a press conference. It'll be the story of the decade. And if I refuse, David's smile disappears. His face becomes a mask of cold, surgical precision. Then I go to the police. I tell them my wife faked her death to commit insurance fraud. I tell them you abandoned your child. I'll make sure you spend the next 10 years in a cage, Maya and Sophie. She'll grow up knowing her mother is a criminal who didn't love her enough to stay. He leans in, his face inches from mine. I can smell his expensive aftershave. You have 24 hours to pack your things. I have a private jet waiting at the regional airport. Don't try to run. I have people at the bus station, the train depot, and every road out of this town. See you at noon tomorrow, sweetheart. He turns and walks out of the shop, the bell chiming with a cheerful ting that feels like a mockery. I sink to the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. He found me. After all the planning, all the sacrifice, he found me. And he's still holding the leash. But as I sit there, surrounded by the smell of bread and the wreckage of my quiet life, I remember something Sarah told me the day I left. David's greatest strength is his reputation. He lives and dies by what people think of him. If you want to beat a man like that, you don't run, you pull back the curtain. I stand up. My legs are shaky, but the fog in my brain is starting to clear. David thinks he's won. He thinks I'm the same terrified girl he pushed against that railing 3 years ago. He thinks I'm cornered. He forgot one thing. I didn't just spend 3 years baking bread. I spent 3 years preparing. I go to the back of the shop to the small office where I keep my records. Behind a loose floorboard under my desk, I pull out a heavy manila envelope. Inside are copies of every medical record David tried to hide. Notes from the nurse who saw the bruises in college. A recording I made on a hidden pen the night he threatened to kill me on the deck. And most importantly, documentation of the charity money David has been laundering through his mental health foundation. I hadn't used it because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I came forward, he'd kill me before I reached the courthouse. But now, he's already here. The threat is in my face. I pick up the phone and dial a number I've had memorized for 1,000 days. It's a journalist in Seattle, a woman who specializes in exposing untouchable men. Hello? A voice answers. My name is Maya Mitchell, I say, and for the first time in 3 years, I don't feel like a ghost. And I have a story for you that's gonna burn a hero to the ground. The next 24 hours are a blur of adrenaline and cold calculation. I send the files. I send the recording. I tell her everything. The abuse, the gaslighting, the night I had to die just to stay alive. This is huge. Maya, the journalist, Elena, tells me. But you realize what happens when we run this. He'll come for you. Let him, I say. He's already coming. But this time, the whole world is going to be watching. The next morning at exactly 11:55, I walk toward the town square. David is waiting by a sleek black SUV, looking at his watch. He looks up as I approach, a triumphant smirk on his face. On time, he says. I knew you were a sensible girl, Maya. Put your bags in the back. I didn't bring any bags, David, I say. He frowns. What are you talking about? We have a schedule to keep. I'm not going with you, I say, my voice loud and clear. People in the square start to turn and look, and I'm not hiding anymore. David steps toward me, his eyes flashing with rage, but he keeps his voice low. Maya, don't be stupid. I told you what would happen. Do you want to go to prison? Do you want to lose Sophie forever? I'm not the one going to prison, David, I say. I pull out my phone and show him the headline that just broke on the Seattle Times website. The ghost wife speaks. Exclusive evidence of abuse and corruption against hero surgeon David Mitchell. David's face goes pale. He snatches the phone from my hand, his eyes scanning the article. He sees the link to the recording. He sees the photos of the laundry records. He sees the quotes from the nurse he thought he'd silenced years ago. You bitch, he hisses. He raises his hand, his surgical precision forgotten in a moment of pure, raw fury. Go ahead, I say steadily. stepping into space. Hit me. Right here. In front of all these witnesses. In front of that news crew that just pulled up behind you. He freezes. He looks over his shoulder and sees a local news van, its camera already pointed at us. He looks around at the townspeople, who are now whispering and pointing. The mask is slipping. The hero is disappearing. And in his place is a small, terrified man who just realized his world is on fire. This is a lie. David shouts, turning toward the camera, his voice cracking. She's unstable. She's mentally ill. She faked her death to hurt me. I faked my death to escape you. I yell back, and I have 3 years of evidence to prove why. The police arrive 10 minutes later, not to arrest me for fraud, but to take David in for questioning regarding the extortion and the financial irregularities in his foundation. As they lead him away in handcuffs, he looks back at me, his eyes full of a hatred so deep it should have burned me. But I just stand there. I don't feel hate. I don't even feel fear. I just feel light. It took another year of legal battles. I had to face the consequences of my death. I had to pay fines. I had to do community service for the false report. I had to go through months of supervised visits with Sophie to rebuild the bond I'd been forced to break. But today is Sophie's 6th birthday. We're in a park in Denver, far away from the sound and the Maine coast. My parents are there, crying and hugging me every 5 minutes. Sarah is there, watching from a distance with a small, knowing smile. And Sophie, my beautiful, brave Sophie, is running toward me with a handful of wildflowers. "Mommy, look," she cries, throwing herself into my arms. I hold her so tight, I think I might never let go. The smell of her hair, the sound of her laugh. It was worth every second of the dark. It was worth every night I spent as a ghost. David is in prison now. His reputation is gone, his medical license is revoked, and he'll never hold a leash over another human being again. I used to think that the only way to survive him was to die, but I was wrong. The only way to survive him was to live, and to make sure the truth lived with me. My name is Maya, and for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.